Erie, Pennsylvania, a fading industrial town on the shore of Lake Erie. The kind of place where everybody knows your name, where nothing much ever happens, and where a pizza delivery man named Brian Wells had spent the last decade driving the same quiet streets. Brian Wells was 46 years old, a high school dropout, painfully shy. He lived with his mother, spent his evenings watching Survivor, and took care of 3 cats. He once had the hubcaps removed from his car because he thought they were too flashy. He'd been delivering pizzas for Mamma Mia's for nearly 10 years. And on the afternoon of August 28, 2003, a phone call came into the shop that would end his life. At 1:30 in the afternoon, an order came in. 2 small sausage and pepperoni pizzas. The delivery address led down a dirt road to a clearing in the woods, near a television transmission tower on the outskirts of town. It was an unusual spot for a delivery, but Brian took the order and drove. What happened in that clearing is where the story fractures. What we know for certain is this: Brian Wells arrived to deliver pizzas, and when he left that clearing, he had a bomb locked around his neck. The collar bomb was a homemade device, a hinged metal collar that locked around the neck like a handcuff. Inside its housing sat 2 pipe bombs and 2 kitchen timers. It had 4 keyholes under the chin. It was padlocked shut, and it was ticking. At 2:30 in the afternoon, 1 hour after leaving the pizzeria, Brian Wells walked into the PNC Bank at Summit Town Center, a strip mall just south of Erie. He carried a cane that concealed a homemade shotgun. Tucked under his white t-shirt was the collar bomb, and in his hand he held a note. The note demanded $250,000. It told the teller that a bomb was attached to him. It told them he had only 15 minutes. The teller didn't have anywhere near that amount. She gathered what she could. Brian Wells walked out of the bank with $8,702, a fraction of what the note demanded. But Brian wasn't fleeing. He was following instructions. A set of handwritten notes in his car, addressed to bomb hostage, laid out a twisted scavenger hunt. Find a fire hydrant, tie an orange ribbon to it, signal that the money had been collected, then wait for someone to drive by and pick it up. Then go to the next location for a key, then the next. The notes described a chain of stops that would, supposedly, give him the codes and keys to unlock the collar bomb before the timer ran out. There was just one problem. The scavenger hunt was impossible to complete in time. Investigators later calculated that even if everything went perfectly, the route would have taken far longer than the timer allowed. The bomb was always going to go off. The police arrived within minutes. They found Brian Wells sitting on the ground in the parking lot. He was handcuffed, and he was terrified. For 20 agonizing minutes, Brian Wells sat in that parking lot, handcuffed, with a bomb locked to his neck. State troopers kept their distance. The bomb squad had been called, but they were still en route, and Brian was begging.
I don't have a lot of time. It's gonna go off. I'm not lying.
He told the troopers that 4 men had forced him to wear the device, that they'd made him rob the bank, that if someone didn't help him, he was going to die. The officers had no way of knowing if the bomb was real. They had no way of knowing if Brian was telling the truth. They kept their distance.
Why isn't anybody trying to help me? It's going to go off.
Then the device began to beep. The beeping lasted 10 seconds. Brian Wells knew what it meant. He tilted his head back, and then the bomb detonated. The blast tore a hole through Brian Wells' chest. He died instantly, sitting handcuffed on the pavement in a parking lot in Erie, Pennsylvania at 3:18 in the afternoon. He was 46 years old. The bomb squad arrived 3 minutes later. The footage of Brian Wells' final moments was captured by news cameras. It was later leaked online and became one of the most disturbing pieces of true crime footage ever recorded. But the horror of what happened in that parking lot was only the beginning, because the question that now consumed investigators was the one that would take 7 years to answer. Who did this to Brian Wells? And was Brian Wells really a victim at all? 3 weeks after the bombing, on September 20th, 2003, a man named William Rothstein called the police. He had something to report. There was a dead body in his freezer. The body belonged to James Roden. Rothstein told police that his associate, a woman named Marjorie Deal Armstrong, had murdered Roden with a shotgun during a dispute over money. Rothstein said he'd helped her hide the body and clean the crime scene, and that she'd paid him $2,000 for the favor. At the time, investigators couldn't connect the body in the freezer to the pizza bomber case. It seemed like a separate crime. It wasn't. To understand this case, you have to understand 3 people, and the first is the most dangerous. Marjorie Deal Armstrong was born in 1949 in Erie. She was brilliant, a child prodigy. She excelled academically, earned a master's degree from Gannon College, and scored an exceptionally high IQ. But sometime in her 20s, something changed. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and paranoia. She became manipulative, volatile, and dangerous, especially to the men in her life. In 1984, she shot and killed her boyfriend, Robert Thomas, as he sat on their living room couch. She claimed self-defense and was acquitted. In 1992, she was charged with the attempted murder of her husband, Richard Armstrong. And in 2003, she murdered James Roden, the man whose body Rothstein stored in his freezer. Marjorie Deal Armstrong was a serial killer, and she was the mastermind behind the pizza bomber plot. Her motive was inheritance. Marjorie's father, Harold Deal, ran a successful awning business. She wanted him dead so she could collect. She approached Kenneth Barnes, a crack cocaine dealer, and her so-called fishing buddy, and offered him $250,000 to kill her father. That's why the banknote demanded exactly that amount. The robbery was never about the money itself. It was a payment. The second key figure is William Rothstein, a reclusive handyman and self-described intellectual who lived in a cluttered house filled with books and tools. The FBI believed Rothstein was the engineer of the plot. He built the collar bomb in his garage, using pipe bombs and kitchen egg timers. On the day of the robbery, he ordered the pizzas that lured Brian Wells to the transmission tower. And according to a co-conspirator, it was Rothstein who locked the device around Brian's neck. The fourth conspirator was Floyd Stockton, a drifter who lived with Rothstein. According to the FBI, Stockton carried the finished bomb out of Rothstein's garage on the day of the robbery and handed it to Rothstein to be fitted onto Wells. Stockton would later receive full immunity in exchange for his testimony. And then there is the question of Brian Wells himself. Was Brian Wells an innocent hostage forced into a robbery at gunpoint, or was he a willing participant who got in over his head? According to the FBI, the truth is somewhere in between. Investigators concluded that Wells had participated in the planning of the robbery the day before. He knew about the plot. He agreed to it. But he believed the bomb would be fake, a prop, something to show the police if he got caught, so he could claim he was forced into it. When he arrived at the transmission tower that day, he discovered the plan had changed. The bomb was real. And by then, it was too late. The pizza bomber case became one of the longest and most complicated investigations in FBI history. Special Agent Jerry Clark led the case for over 7 years. William Rothstein died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma on July 30th, 2004, less than a year after the robbery. He was 60 years old. On his deathbed, investigators questioned him about the Wells case. He said nothing. He took his secrets with him. In January 2005, Marjorie Deal Armstrong pleaded guilty but mentally ill to the murder of James Roden and received 7 to 20 years in prison. But the pizza bomber charges were still coming. In 2007, 4 years after Brian Wells died in that parking lot, federal prosecutors finally indicted Marjorie Deal Armstrong and Kenneth Barnes for their roles in the bank robbery and the death of Brian Wells. Barnes cooperated. He confirmed that Deal Armstrong was the mastermind, that the robbery was meant to fund the murder of her father, and that Rothstein had built the bomb. Barnes was convicted on bank robbery charges and sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. Marjorie Deal Armstrong's trial in 2010 was chaotic. She was disruptive, paranoid, and combative in court. She insisted she was innocent. She blamed Rothstein. She blamed Wells. She blamed everyone. The jury didn't buy it. She was found guilty of armed bank robbery, conspiracy, and using a destructive device in a crime of violence. She was sentenced to life in prison, plus 30 years. Marjorie Deal Armstrong died on April 4th, 2017, at the Federal Medical Center in Carswell, Texas. She was 68 years old. She never admitted her role in the plot. The pizza bomber case was described by the FBI as one of the most bizarre and complicated crimes in its history. A pizza delivery man, a collar bomb, a scavenger hunt that was designed to fail, a body in a freezer, a serial killer with a genius IQ, a bomb maker who died with his secrets, and a plot to kill a father for his inheritance.